In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace all these coolant components with this water pump kit in a BMW 328i. Let's get into it. Using a 8mm socket, we want to take these screws out. Take this panel down. Some screws on the side. Drop the panel and slide it down. After you take the shield off, you want to take a straight blade screwdriver and have a drain bucket underneath. You want to make sure the vehicle's cold while you're doing this. Do not do this while the vehicle's hot. And we'll just drain the coolant. I'll take the reservoir cap off. It's going to allow the coolant to drain out. Take the drain plug, get that lined up. And just snug that up. That's good. Using a T25 socket, take the screw out. Grab the hose. You might want a drain bucket underneath just in case some more coolant comes out. Just slide it out. Just a little bit. Using the T25 socket, take this screw out. And the cooler is going to separate from the fan. You can just push that aside. Loosen up the worm clamp right here on the airbox. Just use a straight blade screwdriver. Disconnect the connector. I'm just going to use a pick, get under the tab. It's for the mass airflow sensor. Slide that off, just like that. And then you can pull the snorkel off as well if you can reach it. There should be two bolts right here. You want to take those out. Use a 10mm socket. Take the other one out as well. You can slide the airbox off, take the snorkel off. And it slides right out. Disconnect the connector, just push down on the tab, slide that out, and move that wire out of the way. It's fine right there. I'm going to take this hose off the reservoir, just using a pick, slide underneath, slide the clip up, pop that off. Just using a trim tool, you can pop these retainers out. Oh, sometimes they break. And the upper radiator hose, just use a pick, get under the clip, slide that up. And just rock it back and forth, try to slide it out. There we go. Slip that off. And we're gonna take it off here as well, just to move it out of the way more. Use a pick. Slide that clip out. That comes off. And just slide this out of the way. Disconnect this hose here. Just push on these tabs. Slide that up. And we'll take that nut off. Use a 10mm socket. Remove that nut. And this filter is just going to slide up out of the way. You can see down here where the connector is. Just push on the little spring release. Disconnect the connector. Just pushing down there. Then you might want a drain bucket underneath here just in case any coolant comes out. Just push on the two tabs on the side and slide it up. We're going to disconnect this connector. I'm just going to use a pick. Just get underneath here, under the clip. Slide that connector out. Grab the connector. We're just going to twist it, and it slides right out. I'm using a T25 socket. Take this screw out. Take that out. There's a tab on this side. You want to push that tab out. You just push it towards the back of the vehicle. And then grab the fan and slide the fan assembly up. And it comes right out. And just wiggle it back and forth. It is plastic, so be careful. A little bit of coolant is coming out. Take this hose off. I'm just going to use a pick to release the clip. Make sure you have a drain bucket underneath just in case some fluid comes out. So wiggle this back and forth. Yep, a little bit of coolant. Slide that hose out. Using the pick, we'll just pop this clip out for this hose. Just take it off completely and rock that hose back and forth. Slide that off, out of the way. I'm using a smaller pick. I'm going to disconnect the connector on the bottom. There's a little tab there. Just push up on the tab. And disconnect the connector. There we go. There's the connector. Set that aside. There's a hose that goes in the back. Use a straight blade screwdriver. Loosen up that worm clamp. Slide that back. I'm just going to use a pick. Just get under the hose. I'm going to work that off in the back. You can kind of get in there from beside the side of the cradle. Just pull that off. On the side is a hose that goes to the back of the thermostat. You want to remove that. Just loosen up the worm clamp. You can use a 1/4-inch socket on the worm clamp or a straight blade screwdriver. Take this panel off. Use a 16mm socket. Take the bolts out. Grab the hose and pull it back. Oh, more coolant. Underneath here, there's 2 bolts. We're going to take those out with a wrench. Just use a 10mm wrench. Loosen those up. If you can fit a socket in there, you could do that. Once you crack them free, then you can do it by hand. I'll take that bolt out. And I'll get the other bolt, loosen that up with the wrench. Slide the bolt out. Grab the thermostat, and it slides right out. There's a hose on the back of the water pump that goes to the side. You gotta release the hose clamp on that. Just use a 1/4-inch socket. I'm just getting this from underneath with a universal adapter. Just gonna try to pry this hose off a little bit, just to break it loose. You don't have to take it off completely yet. Using a E12 socket, take the water pump bolts out. Just to gain some more access, I'm going to use a 13mm socket. Take these 2 bolts off for the sway bar. You can pry that out just a little bit. You could also use a 10mm socket if you have a swivel socket. That helps. Makes it easier to access this lower bolt. All right, there's the bolt. Push that out of the way. Push the button down if you can access it. There we go. Just using a screwdriver to help push the connector off. Disconnect the connector. And it's going to slide right out. And there it is. This lower hose, we're going to take this off just using some hose clamp pliers. There's a clamp on there, a hose clamp. The way this hose clamp is, it might be easier to just cut the hose clamp off if you can access a grinder in there. Because this hose clamp appears to be broken, I'm not able to use the hose clamp pliers. I'm just going to have to cut it from the back side. Do the best you can. There we go. Popped it off. Up top, we're going to take these 2 bolts out. Use a 10mm socket. Grab the coolant hose and slide it out. And the retainer right here, I'm just going to use a pick. Just release the clip. And the hose comes right out. I'll take the new hose. Just put a little silicone on the O-ring. Slide that in place. Take the bolts, get those started. Snug those down. And torque these to 89 inch-pounds. I'm going to put the hose in the clamp and close that up. Take the hose clamp. I already have it in the hose clamp pliers. Take the hose, slide that on, slide it on the tube. There we go, just twist that so that's lined up. Somewhat how it was when you took it off. And just release the hose clamp. Now we need to put this hose on before we slide the pump back in place. It'll just make it easier. The shorter side of the hose is going to go towards the water pump. Make sure you have your clamp on there. So you want to look at the old one, get it kind of to the right angle before we tighten that down. You can also take the thermostat housing and stick this on temporarily, just so you get the right angle that you need. So we know that's going to be like that. And we'll tighten this down. Just snug that down, make sure that doesn't move. That looks good. And we'll take this off again. The other hose clamp over that, and we're ready to slide this back in the vehicle. Take the hose clamp, we'll slide that over that hose, slide in underneath. There we go, that's lined up. Before I tighten that down, let's try to get some of the bolts lined up. So get the bolts started. And you want to make sure you use the new bolts for the water pump. All right, so get that clamp lined up. And we'll put this hose on. Get it close and then make adjustments, and then you can tighten it down the rest of the way. Make sure you put new bolts. Just use a pry bar if you need to get the bolt holes to line up. It helps a little bit. Those are all snug. Now we're going to torque these bolts to 7 foot-pounds and then an additional 90 degrees. 7 and go another 90 degrees. Do the same with the other two. I'll plug the connector in. Lock it down. I'm just checking it, making sure it's locked in. It's all the way down. That's good. Now I'll take this clip. You want to reinstall this over the hose. There you go, that's all set. And then get the hose clamp ready for this one. And take the thermostat housing, slide this hose on. Right. I'm not going to tighten that yet. I'm going to get the hose lined up with the water pump hose. Connect the connector. And get the hose lined up down below. Slide that on. Now I'm going to tighten down the worm clamps on the back. All right, that's tight. Just make sure the hose doesn't move. That looks good. I'll get the bottom one lined up. And we'll tighten that down. And snug that up. That looks good. To get the bolts in for the thermostat, to make it easier, taking the bolts out, then you can move the sway bar. Just put a piece of wood or a hockey puck or something like that, and then it's a little bit easier getting these in and out. Get the bolts started. And we'll get the other bolt started. And just snug those both down. That's good. Put the bolts in for the stabilizer bar. Tighten those down. Now take this hose, the clip's already on there. Lock that in place. Take this hose, this top part, we're gonna put that sensor in. You can put a little lubrication, some silicone on that seal, just so it goes in without rolling. Oh, just pushes down, locks in place. Slide this hose, it's gonna go right there. And just lock that in place. That's locked in. With this hose, I'm just going to take the clip, put the clip back on, and just lock that in place. Slide the hose onto the radiator and just lock it down. Take the fan assembly and we'll slide it down in place. Make sure the cooler's out of the way down below. And if you have that wire over on the passenger side, you want to make sure that's clear. Lock that in place. That's good. I'm going to put this screw in and tighten that down. Snug that down. Take this connector, just twist it, line that up, lock that in place. You can connect the connector for that. Take this connector, there you go, that's locked down. And the connector for the fan, plug that in. Push the wires into the retainers. Now take this, make sure you push down on the clamps for the upper radiator hose. Get that lined up. Click that in place. Do the same on this side. Lock that down. This hose is going to attach over here. Actually disconnect connector for the fan, slide that on the other side, then connect the connector. Push those tabs there and there. Push those in, push down on the lock, and slide that into the reservoir. And take this filter, slide this in place, lock it down, put the nut on, and tighten that down. Now take the air box, line that up, and slide it over the snorkel. Make sure it goes on completely. And we'll tighten the worm clamp down. Snug that down. You can use the straight blade screwdriver or a 1/4-inch socket. Connect the connector for the mass airflow sensor. And put the screws in here. There should be 2. Get those started. Snug those down. Now take the clip, we're going to reinsert it on this lower hose. Slide the hose onto the radiator. Make sure it clips in place. It's good. Take the cooler, line it up. There is a slot that the little tab goes in up top. Put the screw in. Tighten that screw down. Snug that down. Take this hose, line that up, put a little silicone on the O-ring. Push that in place. Take the screw, get the screw started, and I'll snug that down. Take this shield, slide that in place, get the bolt started. And snug those down. I'll slide this panel in place. Get the bolt started. Now tighten those down. You take a straight blade screwdriver, you're going to loosen up the bleeder screw here for the coolant. Using a funnel, you can add the appropriate coolant. Make sure it's the correct mixture, 50-50 water to coolant. You can tell when it's full. There is a gauge right here that comes up. So you want to make sure, check on the side of the tank to the key to make sure it's at the appropriate mark. And you can close the bleeder screw. Make sure that gauge is in the appropriate spot. This vehicle, it's broken, so it's broken off down there, but this looks fine here. Put the cap on. And then we're going to start the bleed procedure inside the car. And we're going to put the key in the on position, but don't start the vehicle. And you want the HVAC on the lowest setting as far as the blower goes, and turn the heat all the way up. And then we're going to hold the gas pedal all the way to the floor for 10 seconds. All right. The water pump is electric, so the computer is going to command the electric water pump to cycle through and pump out all the air so that bleeds out the system. You can hear the water pump doing its thing. It's cycling, pushing the air through, and it's going to do this for about 10 minutes. After that, you can just shut the vehicle off and you should be good to go. It's also a good idea to have a battery charger connected to the battery just so that the battery doesn't drain.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.